Hey nerds, just Jamie here with
your friend Claude.
And this is Nerd Bomber vs. Movies, the show where two movies fight and we pick a winner. Two things we always like to mention. First, our rubric. We have a scoring system. We don't just pull these scores out of thin air or anywhere else. Second, we don't show the movies on the show. That's too long and too expensive. Go find them. Let us know what you think. For today's movies, we have a couple of B movies on the show today. The connection between them being that each somehow manages a strange combination of both ripping off movie franchises while also predicting those same movie franchises, but in opposite ways. And hopefully I can make that make sense before we're all done today. I should mention the actual movies, I guess. We've got a couple of cyborgs on the show today. In 1986's The Eliminators and 1987's R.O.T.O.R. All right, we'll start with Eliminators. Firstly, we have a writing team that's appeared on Nerd Bomber vs. Movies before. Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, best known for their work on The Rocketeer, which got healthy scores from us previously, as a matter of fact. Directing, we have Peter Manoogian, who is very competent working in this low-budget world. He's done a lot of fun 80s and 90s B-level material, such as Enemy Territory, Arena, Seed People, and Demonic Toys. I can recommend Arena. As far as the cast goes, in his only significant role, to say nothing of this being the only time he was the actual star, he plays the earnest former pilot turned weapon mandroid named John, Patrick Reynolds. Denise Crosby, best known as Tasha Yar from Star Trek The Next Generation, plays scientist Colonel Nora Hunter. Andrew Prine plays the riverboat captain. Yes, you heard that right, riverboat captain. He is most well known for appearing in supporting roles in westerns like Bandolero, Chisholm, Rooster Cogburn, but he did a lot of this kind of stuff in the 80s, as a matter of fact. Conan Lee plays the ninja Kuji, son of the good Dr. Takada. Lee did a few little-known Chinese martial arts movies and a handful of TV appearances before stepping away from acting shortly after this film, but the rumor is that he is planning a comeback, so watch out, world, for Conan Lee. Playing the aforementioned Dr. Takada is Tad Hirino. Hirino had a fun career that really got started in his 40s with films like Airport 1975 and Kentucky Fried Movie. He later would appear in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, all the way up to Mulholland Drive and Kung Pao Enter the Fist in the early 2000s. Lastly, in the main cast, playing the primary antagonist and evil scientist Abbott Reeves is Roy Dotrice. His career spanned from the 60s to the mid-2000s. Most notably, he played Father on the Beauty and the Beast TV show. He was a regular on Picket Fences. He also appeared in Hellboy 2 and Game of Thrones, among other things. He did a lot of episodes of TV, including an episode of Magnum P.I. Hey. All right, so obviously this movie is doing some things. We've got a cyborg, we've got a scientist, we've got a ninja, we've got a riverboat captain, we've got the makings of a very unique D&D campaign. But let's talk about what it's ripping off and what it's predicting. First, it's nominally swiping from the original Terminator movie. John, the mandroid, is constructed to be a soldier for a villainous overseer like the Terminator is by Skynet. And there's some time travel going on, but that's basically it. T-800 Terminators only have living skin, no actual humanity. In this movie, John is part human, and he's not the villain. So that brings us to what it's actually predicting. So much of what's happening here in this movie is Robocop. Yeah. John is a downed good guy like Peter Weller's Alex Murphy. He's resurrected as an armored cyborg like Alex Murphy. He struggles with the partial memories of his past like Alex Murphy. He's manipulated by his makers like Alex Murphy. And he turns on his makers like Alex Murphy. All of this with a release that was a year before Robocop came out. It's really uncanny. And maybe Paul Verhoeven would like to make some confessions. Actually, it's unlikely. He would have been deep into the production of Robocop before in order to implement any of this. Maybe even post-production by the time this movie came out.
Could be.
But it's just an example of parallel thinking in Hollywood. We've seen this many times in cinema history. As far as the pop culture footprint for this movie, 0. It was a B release at the time. It had just enough of a theatrical release to make a few bucks at the box office. Maybe got onto some drive-in screens. Maybe even some more revenue from video releases. I know that I used to rent it way back when. But that's it. There's no books, there are no comics, no games, no toys, no sequels, no TV shows, nothing. And other than inspiring a 2011 sci-fi parody film called Manborg, which was itself a low-budget indie release, it doesn't really have any kind of cult following of its own now. It's largely forgotten, unfortunately. All right, on that somber note, that's it for the Eliminators. So 1 down, 1 to go. Let's talk about 1987's R.O.T.O.R, R.O.T.O.R, or Robotic Officer Tactical Operation Research. I didn't say it made sense. And let's talk about the creative team. The screenplay was written by Bud Lewis. Lewis only has 2 screenplays to his credit, this and another low-budgeter called Dragonfight. He mostly was in art departments doing storyboards for various low-budget movies and a lot of animation in the 80s and 90s, including Care Bears and The Real Ghostbusters, among many others. The story and directing credits go to Cullen Blaine. Like Lewis, his background is mostly working in art departments and animation, including a lot of things that we would have watched in the 80s and 90s, like Biker Mice from Mars, Rocko's Modern Life, Real Ghostbusters, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Fantastic Max, Denver the Last Dinosaur, A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, Animaniacs, many, many others. He does have other directing credits, but those are also in animation. Those are highlighted by episodes of Hey Arnold and Garfield and Friends. So these 2 guys are huge in animation, at least a lot of the stuff that I was watching, I think you were too, like I said, in the 80s and 90s. And but not so much live action. All right, so let's get into the casting though. Who's in this thing anyway? Almost nobody. First, as R.O.T.O.R is Carol Brandon Baker in his only acting role. There's also some stuntmen that get some credit. The muscular Jane Smith plays Dr. C.R. Steele, R.O.T.O.R's designer. She has 2 credits, this and something called Flesh Gordon Meets the Cosmic Cheerleaders. Next is Richard Geiswine in his only film role as J.B. Coldiron, the lead scientist of the police robotics lab. Michael Hunter plays Earl G. Bulger, money embezzler and commander of the police department. Hunter is a real acting veteran in this cast with 4 film credits, only one other of which was a character with a name, Pete the homeowner in Robocop. Lastly, we have Margaret Trigg as Sonia Guerin, who spends most of the movie getting chased by R.O.T.O.R. She's another acting veteran here, actually. She has 5 credits, count them 5, which included 8 episodes of a TV series called Aliens in the Family. So in terms of on-credit time, she takes the win by a wide margin among this group. All right, now for the comparisons to other films like we did the other movie. Firstly, Robocop. Here the comparisons are nominal. He's a cop, and that's about it. He isn't part human. He's definitely the villain. It's a little bit more similar to the original Terminator because we at least have a sequence highlighting the questionable mechanical endoskeleton. But the real comparison is to Robert Patrick's T-1000 in Terminator 2. We have a machine villain like the T-1000, and he's dressed like a motorcycle cop like the T-1000. These similarities are here in a movie that predates T2 by several years, and this movie even sat on the shelf for a couple years before that. So again, parallel thinking. We know even less about the financial success of this movie, as Claude will illustrate in just a minute. In terms of the pop culture footprint, nothing. It does not get the edge over the Eliminators, though. Or it does get the edge a little bit, because it has at least been riffed by the Riff Tracks guys, which is worth considering. So, slight advantage. All right, I think that's it for the basics. Claude, good luck with that big board today. All right, we are back with the big board, as I said we would be. The cupboard is a little bit more bare than usual. So, Claude, like I said, good luck.
Well, this is the tail of the tape for the duo of Eliminators and R.O.T.O.R. And we'll start as we always do with the distributing studio, and they are not names you are likely to recognize. Starting with Empire Pictures for Eliminators, and the very differently named Imperial Entertainment for R.O.T.O.R. Imperial Entertainment is a distribution company started the year before R.O.T.O.R came out, whose claim to fame is distributing Disney movies exclusively in Poland. So this was a get for them. Eliminators is rated PG because it had a small theatrical run in the United States. R.O.T.O.R, however, is unrated because it did not. Moving down to running time, pretty similar. 96 minutes for Eliminators, 90 merciful minutes for R.O.T.O.R. Release date is a little interesting. We have a very early in the year release date of January 31st, 1986 for Eliminators. And that is for, of course, its theatrical release. However, again, R.O.T.O.R kind of changes things up because it did not get a theatrical run anywhere except for Italy. This date, July of 1988, is the date it was released in the U.S. on home video. Neither movie has any publicly available budget information. I feel like you would have to make an educated guess. And if you watch the movie, I feel like you will have all the education you need to make a guess. Probably it's a little more generous in the case of Eliminators. Whatever it had to work with, it worked with it fairly well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
R.O.T.O.R. did what it could.
R.O.T.O.R. got made.
It exists. However, with that questionable budget, Eliminators made $4.6 million. More at the box office than Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which we covered in another episode. So let that sink in.
Mm-hmm.
As for any kind of profit for R.O.T.O.R., your best guess is equally as good as our best guess, and we have this board, which makes us the experts.
That's right. It's interesting, the release date of 88. I think I had it as 87. That might have been the Italian release. There you go.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, some not as much information as we're used to seeing, but we thought it would be fun to dive into the B-movie pond, and here we are.
We'll swim in it again.
That's for sure. All right, so that's the big board. We're going to go watch some robot movies, and then we're going to give you some scores, so we'll be right back. All right, we're back with our first set of scores for Eliminators. I believe I am up first, and here we go. Pretty good scores. Again, we are dealing with B movies here. They have limited resources. I think Eliminators mostly does what it wants to do in a successful way. Visuals, 6. There's really nothing to rag on with this movie. Like I just said 2 seconds ago, you may remember. Working with limited resources, but they pull off optical effects in this movie. They pull off... the Mandroid's robot suit looks completely high quality. It's a little bit Robocop. It's a little bit Borg.
Yeah.
Before either of those things actually existed. So... really pulls it off. The mobile unit is also a lot of fun. There's a lot of special effects makeup. In addition, it's something I didn't mention. We were talking about the basics. I'll mention it here, even though it really comes into play with some of the other scores. In addition to a cyborg and a riverboat captain and a scientist and a ninja, we also have Neanderthals in this movie. We have cavemen. And we have ninjas fighting cavemen, and those cavemen look really good. The special effects makeup on them are quality. There's several of them on screen at a time. In addition to the Mandroid, the evil doctor dons his own robot suit later on.
Yeah.
So all of this really is well pulled off. Most of the stuff that doesn't involve the robots or the special effects makeup is just pretty standard. But it's all competent. So none of that brings the movie down. And what it managed to do, again, with limited resources, I thought was really pulled off. 6, again, a good score on this show. Performances, 5. Very average performances here. Nothing spectacular happening. Everybody just manages the expectation that they have with their character. Again, we do have some limited experience in the cast, at least at this time. And everybody's doing a good job. Everybody's doing a competent job. Nothing spectacular. And then writing, 5.5. Again, very standard writing. It's just good guy, bad guy type of stuff here. But it does get a little bit of a boost because of its ambition, because it is kind of wild. Again, I already said it.
Very.
I've said it a couple times now and before. You know, cyborg, ninja, caveman, riverboat captain, evil scientist. There's some time travel in this movie. There's a little floaty robot, that kind of is some part like the black hole robots from Disney's The Black Hole in the late 70s. So there's a lot going on with this movie. So its ambition gives it a little bit of boost. And for the most part, it manages to balance those things out pretty well. It handles all of these wacky ingredients and makes something that makes some sense. The one thing that it gets a little bit of a downgrade on, so spoiler alert, In the end, the mandroid sacrifices himself and dies to save his friends. This happens like 5 minutes before the villain actually dies.
Yeah.
And we don't get any kind of a scene that really recognizes that moment. His friends don't get a chance to mourn for him or appreciate the sacrifice that he makes. So the booking was a little questionable in the finish here.
Kind of flat.
But until that time, the movie holds together really well with all these different elements. So gets a boost for its ambition, gets a little bit of a downgrade for the finish. But overall, 5.5 represents solid, competent score in what I think is a very fun movie.
Wow, I suppose it's time to reveal my scores. And here they are. Let me start off by saying that this movie deserves a fair amount of credit overall for what it wants to be, what it wants to do, and what it actually does do, given what it had to work with, clearly. Unfortunately, from a technical standpoint, I can't give it that credit. But what I can give it are these scores. In the visuals, I agree with your assessment. I have to give it a 6 as well. Again, spiritually, supportively, it probably deserves a 9, just based on, what it achieved with what it had to work with. But what you actually see on screen in the final product, I think a 6 is a really solid score. Everything you said is true. You're watching kind of a B movie, let's be honest, when you watch this movie. But none of it visually feels heavy-handedly B when you watch it. It fits in with, it's of its time, certainly.
Sure.
But in a lot of ways, it's very comparable to other movies of the time, effects-wise. And I think that's probably its most impressive achievement. Performance-wise, I go 4.5. And that's not to say that people didn't do a good job. Obviously, nobody's winning awards, as I say often. Nobody's blowing you away with some sort of lifetime memorable performance here. But Denise Crosby is an actress who went on to do recognizable things. And she is as solid here as she is in anything else. And everybody else ranges from solid to very ham-fisted.
Some of the henchmen are cartoonish.
Too cartoony, too live-action cartoon. And it's not really to its detriment. It's appreciable. It's able to be appreciated. And I think that because of that, and because of the effects, and because of there's an element of self-awareness, which probably comes over into the writing. So let me share that score of a 4 and continue my point. The self-awareness that the actors deliver on screen, especially the riverboat guy. At one point, he calls out to the camera, we've got ninjas and we've got cavemen and we've got all these things, and
he says, "What is this? One of those sci-fi things?"
Yeah, exactly. Calls it right out. And because of that, it seems to me that if they had leaned into the comedy just a little bit more, this could have been Galaxy Quest a decade earlier.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it could have probably been this cult smash, this unsung gem. The way Galaxy Quest is thought of now, very fondly. And it's not as solid as Galaxy Quest, but it deserves to be thought of, in contention for something like that, I think. That's the way it strikes me. 6, 4.5, 4 for the Eliminators.
All right, so there are the first set of scores. We are going to erase all this and give you another set in just a minute. All right, we're back with our second set of scores for R.O.T.O.R. This should be fun. Claude, why don't you go ahead?
Wow. To the surprise of many, once again, for the third time in show history, I had to go with 8s across the board.
That's crazy. Insanity.
Crazy 8s. Except half of these 8s don't belong here. So, visually, It's actually a 3. A solid 3. Because they shot footage.
The cameras worked.
We know they worked because many of the scenes went on for an interminable length of time and inexplicably continued to roll, despite the scene clearly giving us all the information it had to give.
It possibly could.
Including long, possibly B-roll shots of landscapes in cities and countries. Effects-wise, it's rough. There is a, I guess you can't say infamous, maybe between us and the fellows at Riff Track, scene of this stop-motion cyborg, which I'll let you elaborate on more. For me, the best effect in the movie was the quirky little police assistant robot.
It's the most successful thing, that's true.
It functions. It has like a camera, central eye, and working police lights on the front. The most impressive thing. Oh, even lights on the side to indicate something. And it indicates that it's time to talk about performance. Also, in 3. We're going with 3. Half of 8. Not numerically, but visually. And that is generous.
Yeah.
3 might be the number of performances you can find in this movie. The rest of them are just sort of in the movie. Because they showed up on the day or something. R.O.T.O.R himself is... he's doing stuff. And he's dedicated to it. And it seems to be mostly villainous. Other than that, I don't know, it's rough. They're trying. I mean, you have types, character types. You have the hard-nosed scientist cop who helps create...
Is that a
type? You have the killer cyborg motorcycle cop gone rogue. That's, everybody knows that heartwarming classic.
Age-old trope.
And you have the robot co-creator, super buff scientist police lady with dual-colored hair. The classic character type.
You've seen it 100 times.
So those are the 3 performances I mentioned. Writing is not an 8 either. It's a 3. Yeah. And it gave us those classic character types, along with memorable dialogue, such as, "What's up, sir?" From a police scientist to his boss in division headquarters, or whatever it's called, the glorified parking garage. And you see a lot of the parking garage. It's fun.
It's very big. It's
Yeah.
spacious.
Other than that, there's been a lot of time where R.O.T.O.R is chasing a woman who kind of comes and goes off screen, but we're still to believe that she is actively being chased.
Yes.
Just because she is. When we don't see it, it's referenced a couple times, so there's continuity.
Sure.
And here we are. 3s across the board. R.O.T.O.R receives my lowest score ever. And yet it's still entertaining.
That's why we do the scores. Okay, so here's mine. I am not doing a fun gimmick, but I do not exactly have sky-high scores myself. Visuals, 3. Yes,
Hey,
the camera the camera worked, and they did take some long shots. We got to see Cold Iron and Steel. Yes, those are their names. The 2 fighting cop scientists, R.O.T.O.R creators. We got to see them from a distance pull into a hotel, get out of their vehicle.
That's right.
Get the bags out of their vehicle. The bellboy came and got their bags, and then they walked in. There's no dialogue.
One static shot.
One static shot from across the street, No dialogue, but we got to see it all. One thing this movie didn't seem to be stuck with was remnant reels.
Right.
Because there are some long shots here. There's nothing going on with the visuals. They try to do a stop motion sequence with the metallic endoskeleton. The character Cold Iron is trying to sell his idea of robotic police to some sort of police board, I don't know. And they're all watching this demonstration of this robot, which is clearly not in the same room. The lighting is different. There's no sound effects. It's just this poorly designed endoskeleton with discs on it, short arms, half of a spine.
May or may not be claymation or tinfoil.
Tinfoil, like doing dance moves at times. It's very poorly done, and it looks like it was done on a model that was about this tall.
Yeah.
But they were trying to shoot it up close to make you think this is the size of a full-grown man, which clearly it was not. They tried and failed. The thing that I give it a little bit of credit for is about 2 shots, which is probably where the whole idea started. What if there was a malevolent cop standing backlit
right.
Near a smoke machine? And that shot really works great about twice. Then they don't go to the well to that ever again, and they depend on the rest of their filmmaking talent, which didn't really seem to work out so well.
The 3.
So that gives it the 3, luckily for those 2 shots. Performances, 2. There's nothing happening here. The actor playing R.O.T.O.R does nothing. The actress who is running away from R.O.T.O.R pulls off that part competently. The actor playing Cold Iron seems to be dubbed. We're unsure if he dubbed himself or he was dubbed by a different person. The actor playing his corrupt boss doesn't seem to really know how to... At one point he's looking directly into the camera. As you can see. It's questionable. And the buffed up character of Steel... is, again, just sort of like saying lines. I don't know what to say about it. Like, they're just... They're saying their lines. They hit their spots and they say their lines most of the time. Writing, 2. Again, there's just nothing here. They try to tell their story. The only thing that even gives it a 2 is we mentioned, obviously, how much this sort of predicted some elements of Terminator 2, just with, the robot motorcycle cop. But there's some particular stuff. R.O.T.O.R's motorcycle says, I can't remember exactly what it says.
I think it's R.O.T.O.R.
No, it says R.O.T.O.R. Underneath it says, I want to say it says like serve and execute or something like that. Anyway,
judge and execute.
Yeah, judge and execute. The point is, like, it's also borrowing very heavily from the Judge Dredd comic.
Right. So
it gets a little bit of credit there. It's like maybe they started there and just everything fell apart after that concept. The continuity doesn't really make sense. Like you mentioned, like the woman is supposedly running away from R.O.T.O.R the whole time while they're checking into their hotel. And, she's the bait. They set that up. Like, you're going to be the bait. Meanwhile, I'm going to go get my friend and we're going to go to the hotel and try to figure this all out while you're out there somewhere. There's also strange, like R.O.T.O.R, the robot, has strange weaknesses to car horns, even though he's a police robot that would ostensibly have a siren, but he doesn't like horns. So anyway, this is just, it's very questionable. At the end, they were clearly setting up a sequel because the final sequence shows the character of Steel, who's never shown to die in the movie. It's indicated that she's going to be R.O.T.O.R too, so it's unclear if they're like sort of like going to resurrect her corpse if she died. She kind of gets beaten in a fight by R.O.T.O.R, but there's never any sort of definite indication that she's dead. So is this R.O.T.O.R 2 her? Is it a new robot based on her? How does that work? Cold Iron in the end dies after winning the battle. He gets shot in the back. This movie just makes very little sense. I agree with the final thing you said, though. You almost kind of threw it away, though. The movie's fun to watch.
It is.
The scores are bad. This will be our lowest scoring movie on the show thus far by a wide margin. But the movie's not unwatchable. It's fun.
In fact, you should watch it.
You should watch it. I mean, he mentioned riff tracks. I did too. They do a great riff of it. It's a lot of fun. I think it's worth the time. even though it's not at all competently made or well made, it does not make sense. It does not look good. It does not sound good, but it's fun anyway.
Watch it, if for nothing else, than the moment where you can see the clear vending machine sticker on R.O.T.O.R's helmet, and immediately afterwards, the actual vending machine it came from.
Nothing says intimidating, evil, robot menace like a rainbow helmet sticker.
That's right.
All right, I think that's it for our scores. We are going to do some tabulations. We're going to get the big board out, and we're gonna see the obvious in just a minute. And we're back with the big board, and as you can see, not a very pretty picture. We have about the biggest spread between two movies that we've ever had on the show, and our two lowest scores, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. But first, let's talk about what the scores actually are. Eliminators, we have 5.17, and for R.O.T.O.R, we have 2.67. That's very low. Like I just said, even Eliminators would have been our lowest scoring movie on the show thus far, and it still blows R.O.T.O.R out of the water. Before we really talk too much about it, I just want to talk about those scores. Our previous lowest scoring movie before this episode was Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Sixth Day. The Sixth Day had a 5.55.
Yep. But
I have to say, and again, this is part of the theory of comparing how we emotionally or instinctually feel about a movie versus what the scores say. 5.5 obviously beats both of these movies, but I think that both of us would say that we'd rather watch either of these than The Sixth Day, which gets higher scores.
Yeah, both are much more fun experiences, more entertaining. But you kind of have to address them differently. These are, you can go in knowing that these are, you don't have to take them as seriously. They're pure entertainment value. And I probably will look at The 6 Days that from now on. But going into that, without seeing it before, I expected a little more out of it than I would.
Yeah, there's an expectation of competency that you don't get out of that movie. And with these movies, if anything, with Eliminators, you get pleasantly surprised.
Right.
And R.O.T.O.R kind of is what you expect in a lot of ways, but it's still fun in being what it is.
Sure.
Also. So, I think that it plays out. I was surprised Eliminators was as low as it was, because I know I just personally like that movie.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I was surprised about how R.O.T.O.R turned out or about which of these movies was today's winner.
Accurate.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for this B-movie episode of Nerd Bomber vs. Movies. We are right here on YouTube. Obviously, you have already found us. We also do a podcast called the Nerd Bomber Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Nerd Bomber Pod. From there, you can find links to all of the other things we do. That's the best place to go. For your friend Claude, I've been Just Jamie. And until the next battle,
aloha.
Please deposit litter in trash receptacles as you exit the auditorium. The perfect gift for any occasion, gift certificates are available at the box office. Thanks for visiting with us. Buckle up and drive safely. See you next week.